It's 5 p.m. across India. I'm Tanvi Taneja. We are live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Global. We'll bring you all the day's big stories from across India and the world. And with me today from London is my colleague, Ollie Barrett. Ollie, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Tanvi. Good to be with you. It is 12:30 p.m. here in London, 1:30 p.m. across Central Europe. I've got details of yet more British sanctions over the Ukraine conflict, how close we are to a US government shutdown, and perhaps some relief for European household budgets. First, the headlines.
India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar meets his US counterpart Antony Blinken in Washington, D.C. The two discuss the entire gamut of relations and lay the groundwork for the upcoming 2+2 dialogue. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada remains committed to building closer ties with India following the recent row over the killing of a Khalistani terrorist on Canadian soil. Tensions between Serbia and Kosovo flare up again. Kosovo's president blames Serbia for recent deadly shootout. Serbia denies involvement. And India climbs to the 4th position with a total of 32 medals with 8 goals at the ongoing Asian Games. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met US Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Washington, D.C. on Thursday. Both the leaders discussed a full range of issues, including key outcomes of India's G20 presidency and the creation of the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor and its potential to generate transparent, sustainable and high-standard infrastructure investments. The Secretary and the External Affairs Minister also emphasized the continued importance of cooperation ahead of the upcoming 2+2 dialogue, in particular in the areas of defense, space and clean energy. DD India's Caroline Malone reports from Washington.
There were closed-door meetings between the US Secretary of State Blinken and India's External Affairs Minister Jaishankar on Thursday. The two appeared ahead of their meeting, and Blinken said he was happy to welcome his friend and colleague to Washington following talks in recent weeks.
It's a pleasure to welcome my friend and colleague, Foreign Minister Jaishankar, here to the State Department, back to Washington.
Thank you, Tony. Good to be back here. And we, of course, had the Prime Minister here this summer. We thank the US for all the support at the G20 summit. And I actually look forward to seeing you in Delhi for the 2+2.
The US and India have been increasingly working together in recent months and years on Indo-Pacific strategy, such as through the Quad grouping with Australia and Japan, and on a new India-Middle East-Europe infrastructure and trade deal that was announced at G20. But Blinken has also said publicly that the US is extremely vigilant about any instances of alleged transnational repression in a broader sense, a sign of potentially strained relations between the two nations, even if it is behind closed doors. Caroline Malone in Washington for DD India.
Hosted a luncheon discussion. Discussions were focused on strengthening India-US commercial ties, increased collaboration in the fields of emerging tech, and creating new resilient supply chains. Dr. S. Jaishankar on Thursday met United States Trade Representative Ambassador Catherine Tai and discussed ways of expanding trade and economic relationship between the two countries and its broader significance. The External Affairs Minister also met members of Congress, administration, business and think tank heads at the India House. Next news of the India-Canada diplomatic row. Now, Balraj Singh Nijjar has exposed his father following Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's allegation. He said that Hardeep Singh Nijjar, the pro-Khalistani figure, used to interact with Canadian intelligence services very frequently. Now, during an interview to the Canadian press, he said His father met regularly with Canadian intelligence officers before he was shot dead. His father met with Canadian Security Intelligence Service officers once or twice a week. Hardeep Singh Nijjar also met the intelligence services 1 or 2 days before his alleged murder. The meetings had started in February and the frequency increased in recent months. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was told that there were threats to his life and his father was advised to stay at home. So these are the revelations made by Nijjar's son to Canadian press. Now, amid this diplomatic row with India, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has affirmed that Canada remains dedicated to strengthening its relationship with New Delhi. According to a report by Canada-based newspaper National Post, Trudeau said, and I quote him here, "India is a growing economic power and an important geopolitical player. And as we presented with our Indo-Pacific strategy just last year, we are very serious about building closer ties with India," unquote. Now, staying with the region, at least 57 people have been killed and more than 60 injured in Pakistan in 2 different blasts on Friday. Over 52 were killed in a suicide attack on a religious gathering in Pakistan's Balochistan province. The second blast took place in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, killing 5 people. It collapsed the mosque roof and has trapped about 30 to 40 people under the rubble. No group has claimed responsibility for the blast so far. Hours after the blast in Balochistan, an explosion ripped through a mosque in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, which also borders Afghanistan, killing at least 2 people. Attacks by militants in Pakistan's restive provinces have been on the rise ahead of the general elections scheduled for January 2024. And on to Europe now. The British government today imposed an asset freeze and travel bans on officials linked to the elections in the 5 Russian-annexed Ukrainian regions, including Crimea. Now, this follows Russian President Vladimir Putin's statement signaling these regions' full integration into Russia. My colleague Ollie Barrett is in London. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Ollie, over to you.
Thanks, Tanvi. Yes, that's right. We've heard more moves from the British government today in this regard. The UK imposing sanctions on officials in 4 regions of Ukraine annexed by Russia, as it reaffirms that it will not recognise those areas as Russian territories. Officials from Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk and Crimea will face an asset freeze and travel bans as well. London is also sanctioning Russia's emergencies minister and the secretary of the Russian Central Election Commission. Russian President Vladimir Putin has been meeting with a former commander of the Wagner Group over a month after the mercenary organization's founder, Yevgeny Prigozhin, died in a plane crash. Andrei Troshev and Vladimir Putin discussed how volunteer units could fight in Ukraine. The Kremlin says that Wagner mercenaries now work for the Russian Defense Ministry. Wagner founder Prigozhin died in a plane crash in Russia in August, 2 months after he led a short-lived rebellion against the Russian government.
Andrei Nikolaevich, I would like to begin the meeting by speaking to you in the first place. At the last meeting, we talked about you working on forming volunteer units that can perform various combat tasks, above all, of course, in the zone of special military operation. You have been fighting for over a year in one of those units. You know it is, how it is done. You know about the issues that need to be resolved in advance, so that the combat work goes in the best and most successful way.
And let's get some updates now on the conflict itself. And Russia claims it has downed 11 Ukrainian drones over the Kursk and Kaluga regions. Officials say that the Ukrainian drones with explosives hit a substation in a Russian village close to the border on Friday, cutting off the power supply to a hospital. Ukraine claims it attacked Russian air defense systems and electronic warfare systems. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine says soldiers used missiles to attack targets such as Russian artillery systems and ammunition depots. Next to the United States, which is edging closer to a government shutdown with just a day to go on Congress's deadline to pass a new budget. The Democratic-led Senate forged ahead on Thursday with a bipartisan stopgap funding bill aimed at averting a fourth partial government shutdown in a decade. While the House began voting on partisan Republican spending bills with no chance of becoming law. DD India's Benji Hire has this breakdown.
House Leader Kevin McCarthy says there's still time to forge a late agreement, yet we're just hours away here from a shutdown. Both chambers of Congress are pursuing different, conflicting plans. Bipartisan consensus is rather hard to come by. You might be asking how we got to this point. Well, President Joe Biden and Speaker McCarthy struck a deal months ago determining spending levels for the government. Mr. Biden says some lawmakers are now reneging on that deal, refusing to abide by one of the most basic, fundamental responsibilities of Congress. And unless a stopgap measure is approved before Saturday, the country will careen towards the inevitable, with major consequences for millions of Americans who work for the government or rely on federal services. Thousands of government employees will have their pay suspended. All that's happening whilst eyes on Capitol Hill behind me were firmly fixed on Thursday on an impeachment hearing into President Biden. Republicans accuse him of committing multiple impeachable offences by repeatedly lying about his involvement in foreign business dealings that they claim benefited his family while he was vice president. There's been no concrete evidence yet showing high crimes or misdemeanors, and the White House insists Biden has no ties to his son Hunter's business operations. A vote isn't being brought to the Republican-controlled House floor at this stage. There, it requires a simple majority to impeach and a two-thirds majority in the Democrat Party-held Senate to convict. Only 3 former presidents were ever impeached, including Bill Clinton and Donald Trump twice, but none were ultimately removed from office. Benji Hire in Washington, reporting for DD India.
Now, the International Monetary Fund says that looming shutdown of the US government poses an avoidable risk to the nation's economy. An IMF spokesperson has told journalists, "We certainly are urging the parties to come together to reach a consensus and find a way forward." He went on, "We do see a shutdown as an avoidable risk for the US economy." A New York appeals court has refused to delay Donald Trump's scheduled October the 2nd civil fraud trial. That statement came after the former US President Donald Trump accused the trial judge of wrongly refusing to throw out most of the case. Trump is being sued. That happened on September 2022 to start with by the State Attorney General Letitia James, who is seeking at least $250 million in penalties. Trump has pleaded not guilty and says litigation against him is part of a politically motivated Democratic witch hunt as he seeks a return to the White House. Current US President Joe Biden has called MAGA, or Make America Great Again, which is that election slogan popularized by former President Donald Trump, a threat to democracy. That came during an address in Arizona. Biden's attack on Trump comes as the former president, who is facing those 4 criminal indictments right now, is a possible frontrunner for the 2024 presidential elections.
And there's something dangerous happening in America now. There's an extremist movement that does not share the basic beliefs in our democracy. The MAGA movement. Not every Republican, not even a majority of Republicans adhere to the MAGA extremist ideology.
Now, we were hearing some of this detail from Benji Hire in Washington just a moment ago, but US House Republicans have launched a formal impeachment hearing against President Joe Biden. The Republicans leading the impeachment inquiry probe into family finances and lucrative business dealings of Biden's son Hunter are promising to provide accountability in the case. They say Hunter Biden and other family members were selling access. The chairman of the Oversight, Judiciary and Ways and Means Committees used the opening hearing to review the constitutional and legal questions involved with impeachment. Razor wires, a river and round-the-clock patrolling by security services have failed to contain an influx of migrants at the US-Mexico border.
These are the migrants crossing a border river between the United States and Mexico. The group is among thousands of people from countries like Venezuela and Honduras who are seeking asylum in the US. With Border Patrol struggling to control the massive influx, the US state of Texas signed an emergency declaration to seek funding for additional services. Meanwhile, billionaire Elon Musk has waded into the migrant crisis debate. He said that he visited the Texas border with local officials to get an unfiltered view of the situation.
I think we want to do both things: smooth out legal immigration, and then stop sort of a flow of people that is of such a magnitude that is actually leading to a collapse of social services. Where even America's largest city, New York, is buckling under the pressure of just how many illegal immigrants are going to New York.
As concerns over illegal immigration grow, the crisis has become a major challenge for US President Joe Biden ahead of the 2024 elections.
Inflation in the Eurozone has reached its lowest point in nearly 2 years, according to new numbers from the European Union. The news will come as a relief to households across the bloc, nearly a year since the Eurozone hit its record high in October last year. DD India correspondent Alex Cadier reports from Brussels.
Annual inflation in the Eurozone hit 4.2% in September. That is down from 5.3% last month. These are the lowest inflation numbers for the Eurozone since October 2021 and will undoubtedly come as a huge relief for lawmakers and households across the European Union. Just over a year ago, in October 2022, inflation hit its highest ever peak at 10.6%. That wiped billions from European economies and hurt households across the continent. It was driven by the energy crisis caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent energy blackmail the EU says Moscow used against it. After months of economic pain, the Eurozone is slowly closing in on its 2% inflation target. The question now is, what will the European Central Bank make of these latest figures? The bank decided to hike interest rates to a record level in September, pegging its key rate at 4%. The ECB's most recent predictions for the euro area project inflation will average 5.6% this year, falling to 3.2% in 2024 and 2.1% in 2025. So, will they start thinking about cutting interest rates and prioritizing growth? But there's no sign of that yet. Even France's central bank governor called it premature. But the fact that it's even a question, less than a year after record Eurozone inflation, shows there may yet be hope for the EU's sluggish economies. Alex Cadier in Brussels, reporting for DD India.
Well, that's it from me here in London. Tanvi, have a great weekend. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Ollie. Thank you for steering us through in the bulletin. Ollie Barrett joining me from London. Still to come on DD India Global. Tensions between Serbia and Kosovo flare up again. Kosovo says it's under attack, blames Serbia for the recent deadly shootout. Serbia denies involvement. And happiness level of Hong Kongers at a decade low as a result of COVID post-trauma.
Wherever news breaks, whatever it takes.
Connecting corners, cutting across continents.
Stories that matter from across the globe.
Accurate, authentic journalism that serves you right. From politics to glamour, from sports to world affairs, with a fusion of aesthetics and substance. Introducing news in a new avatar. Experience the world through a new lens. Stay tuned to DD India for an exciting journey beyond borders.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Kosovo's president has accused Serbia of orchestrating a recent shootout between armed men and the Kosovo police, heightening concerns over stability in the region. President Osmani said that Serbia aims to further its territorial claims and create tensions in Kosovo's north. Serbia denied involvement, blaming Kosovo for mistreating ethnic Serbs. The incident underscores ongoing tensions in the Balkans.
In the north of Kosovo was an armed attack by paramilitary forces that have been paid, trained, aided and abetted by Serbia, organized and orchestrated by Serbia. It was a terrorist attack and equally so an act of aggression by the side of Serbia against the Republic of Kosovo, against our sovereignty and territorial integrity.
If there was anyone who could not benefit from what happened in Kosovo, it was Belgrade. It was Serbia for many reasons, political reasons, you name it. Serbia doesn't want war. The Kosovo government have been lying for a year and 7 months since the outbreak of war in Ukraine that Serbia wants war. No, Serbia doesn't want war.
Next news of the shocking incident in the Dutch city of Rotterdam, where a 32-year-old gunman went on a targeted shooting rampage, resulting in the tragic death of 3 individuals. The suspect, identified as a student of the Erasmus University, has left the community in mourning.
The suspected gunman's rampage began when he fatally shot a 39-year-old woman and her 14-year-old daughter before setting their house ablaze. The horrific act of violence was followed by another tragic incident at Erasmus University, where the assailant shot a 46-year-old doctor.
The gunman shot a 39-year-old woman and her 14-year-old daughter at their house. Later, the gunman went to the Erasmus University. There he pointed his weapon at a 46-year-old man who was a teacher and shot at him. Unfortunately, the teacher also died from his injuries.
Dutch law enforcement swiftly apprehended the gunman near the hospital. Authorities have confirmed that the suspect acted alone in this horrifying series of events. A comprehensive investigation is now underway to uncover the motive behind these senseless killings.
Na de schietpartij aan het Heiman-Dullardplein.
Based on the information, we can confirm that the suspect acted alone. We are therefore no longer looking for another suspect. We see his act as a targeted action, but it requires further research to gain clarity about how and why.
Ook aan zijn verwondingen overleden.
The Rotterdam public came together in a poignant display of solidarity, paying floral tributes to the victims of this targeted killing spree. Meanwhile, public prosecutors have revealed their concerns about the erratic behavior of the suspect, leading them to send a warning letter to his school.
It's really terrible. I couldn't stop crying when I heard the news, and now I'm here. I wasn't here yesterday, but my thoughts are with all the people who were here, and it's so sad. That's what I'm feeling right now. It's sad that excesses of this kind exist.
Netherlands Prime Minister expressed his condolences to the grieving families and extended gratitude to the authorities for their rapid response and assistance during the crisis.
Now, we all have our stories of struggle and survival as we have all faced the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Hong Kongers are the glummest they have been for a decade, according to an annual survey called HK.We Care. Last year, one-tenth of people questioned said they were unhappy. This year, one-quarter did. Overall, Hong Kong had a happiness score of 59% this year, a big drop from 66% in 2022. DD India's Andrew Wood has filed this report from Hong Kong.
Well, Hong Kongers, like most people around the world, have had a pretty miserable few years because of COVID, because of the pandemic. But that's gone now, and still Hong Kongers do seem to be less happy than they were a year ago. And I think the political situation has affected Hong Kongers. Last year, the survey gave a figure or a mark of 4.7 out of 10 for Hong Kongers' satisfaction with the way the government was working and the political situation. That's fallen now to 4.2. So remember, we had, just before the COVID pandemic, there were very big protests in Hong Kong. More than 1 million people coming out on the street to protest against new laws, which they felt that meant that Beijing would interfere with the running of Hong Kong more. Well, since then, of course, Hong Kong has been subject to a very strict national security law that's been imposed on the territory. It removes an awful lot of the freedoms that a lot of Hong Kongers thought had been guaranteed by Beijing when it handed over, or rather when Britain handed Hong Kong back to Beijing back in 1997. And the political situation is causing issues as well with older people. Older people are saying that some people are saying that it's difficult because their relatives have left Hong Kong because of the political situation, so they find it more difficult to get on with life because they don't have people to care for them in the same way anymore. In Hong Kong, I'm Andrew Wood reporting for DD India.
As the report also mentioned, it takes time. Now on to Asian Games. India's medal rush continues at the 19th Asian Games underway in Hangzhou, China. Bopanna Rutuja assures silver in mixed doubles. The duo will play Chinese Taipei's Sung Hao Huang and En Shuo Liang in the final. Indian squash team too has won a bronze medal. Women's squash team of Anahat, Joshna, Tanvi and Deepika displayed incredible resilience and skill at the Games. Palak Gulia clinches gold medal in the 10-meter air pistol shooting event, adding another glorious chapter to our nation's shooting legacy. And let's quickly take a look at what else is happening around the world. Australia would retire its fleet of Taiwan earlier than expected. The decision was taken after a helicopter crashed into the ocean off the coast of Queensland state in July during a joint military exercise with the USA, killing 4 Australian air crew. Earlier in the year, Australia announced purchasing 40 Black Hawk military helicopters for an estimated $1.8 billion. In Tokyo, a significant number of Japanese took to the streets in protest, voicing their concerns over the government's continuous pursuit of military expansion amidst the backdrop of severe inflation. Demonstrators are demanding a shift in priorities, urging the government to abandon its adherence to the US strategy of military expansion and instead allocate more financial resources to initiatives that promote economic development. In recent years, Japan has been criticized for what some view as a persistent violation of its pacifist constitution by substantially strengthening its defense forces. A French car collector in Itreshe is offering drives-in of famous movie cars. Among the top cars is 1970 Chevrolet Malibus that actor Ryan Gosling drove in the 2011 action film Drive. So that's it in this edition of DD India Global. We will be back with another edition of the show at 7:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Do join us then. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram at DD India Live. You can also find us online on YouTube at DD India. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Tanvi Taneja from my entire team in New Delhi. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.